The compliment that changed everything. The space station Orion Delta was a quiet place. Engineers worked, scientists typed. No one laughed much. Everyone followed rules. Derek Malone, a young human technician, was one of the only people who liked to talk during work. He joked. He smiled. He made bad coffee for everyone in the lab. He also liked to say something nice to each person he saw. One day he made a joke that changed his life. Derek was assigned to repair work in the xenobiology lab, where different alien species studied medicine and plant life. That day, he was working with Elena, a Tentari female. Her species looked like elegant humanoids with shimmering skin, glowing eyes, and long flowing tentacles instead of hair. Elena never talked much. She always wore a dark robe that hid most of her body, including her tentacles. She was polite, silent, and extremely focused. Derek had worked with her for 3 weeks. She rarely even looked at him. But that morning, something was different. As Derek walked into the lab, he noticed Elena had pulled back her robe just a little. For the first time, her tentacles were partly visible. They shimmered in the lab, light like blue fire moving slightly with her breath. They looked beautiful. "Whoa," Derek said with a small smile. "Hey, Elena, your tentacles look great today." He meant it like a compliment. A small, friendly thing, like saying, "Nice haircut" or "cool jacket." But the reaction was instant. Elena froze. Her tentacles stopped moving. Her skin changed color, going from pale silver to deep violet. She stared at Derek like he had just shouted a war cry. Then, without saying a word, she dropped her tools and walked out of the lab. The other workers looked at Derek with wide eyes. One alien technician, a green-skinned Sarnak, whispered, "You said that to her?" Derek blinked. "What? I just said her tentacles looked great." The Sarnak dropped his tablet. A human scientist at the console gasped. Then someone ran to call the station cultural officer. 10 minutes later, Derek was sitting in the station manager's office, sweating. Across from him was Leora Tim, the human Xeno relations officer. She looked very serious. "Derek," she said slowly, "did you or did you not tell Elena that her tentacles looked great?" He nodded. "Yeah, I mean, they did." Leora sighed and tapped a tablet. Derek, in Tentari culture, complimenting a female's tentacles is not just flattery. "What do you mean?" "It's considered a sacred courtship phrase." Derek's jaw dropped. "You're saying I just hit on her?" "No," Leora said. "You just proposed to her." Derek almost fell off his chair. "I didn't mean it like that. I say nice things to people, that's what humans do." "Not on Tentari," she said. "Tentacles are extremely private. They're not shown unless a female is seeking a partner. If a male notices them and compliments them, it begins a courtship trial." Derek groaned. "She's gonna kill me." Leora looked at her screen. "Actually, she hasn't rejected you." "What?" She sent a message to our language AI. 1 sentence. Derek leaned in. Leora read it aloud. "I will answer the offer in 3 cycles." 3 cycles. That was 3 days. Derek covered his face. "Everyone on this station is going to think I'm marrying her." "They already do," Leora said. "I've had 4 requests for invitations." Back in the lab, Elena returned silently that afternoon. She didn't look at Derek, she didn't speak, but she placed something on his workstation, a small folded cloth with glowing blue embroidery. Derek picked it up slowly. "What is this?" he asked. Leora walked by and whispered, "That's a mating token." "I need a new job," Derek muttered. Later that night, Derek sat in his bunk, staring at the cloth. He thought about her, about how she had always been quiet, always focused, always alone, and now, maybe not so alone. He didn't know what to feel. He had just tried to be kind. But maybe that small act had meant a lot more to someone who had never been seen that way. Out in the dark edge of the station, Elena sat in her quarters. Her robe was open. Her tentacles moved slowly in the air. Her eyes glowed as she looked out at the stars, and in her hand, she held a tiny picture, a printed photo, of a human male, smiling with coffee in his hand. Explaining the unspoken for most of his life, Derek Malone had been the kind of human who could laugh through any problem. But now, 3 days after telling an alien girl her tentacles looked great, he wasn't laughing anymore, he was pacing. The station buzzed with silent whispers. Wherever Derek walked, people smiled politely, or stared too long. One engineer gave him a respectful bow. A security guard called out, "Congratulations, man. Tentari girls are classy." Even the cleaning drone paused near him for 2 seconds longer than normal. Derek groaned. "It's official. Everyone thinks I'm engaged to a woman I barely know. Because of a compliment I didn't know was a marriage proposal." He walked into the cultural liaison office again. Leora Tim didn't look up. "You're early. She hasn't answered yet." Derek dropped into a chair. "I know, I'm going crazy." Leora finally looked at him. "You could always reject the offer." Derek frowned. "What happens if I do that?" "In Tentari culture," she said, folding her hands, "you'll be marked as dishonorable, untrustworthy. You'll lose any right to speak with her again, and she may be sent back to her homeworld." Derek leaned back. "Harsh," Leora added quietly. "Tentari don't take proposals lightly. They get very few, and even fewer that are sincere." He rubbed his face. "But mine wasn't even serious." "You were kind," she said. "Sometimes that means more than intent." Later that day, Derek returned to the lab. Elena was already there. Silent, graceful, working at her station with long fingers and a soft glow on her skin. He walked past her, feeling awkward, unsure. But she looked up and spoke. "My answer is, ready." He froze. She stepped closer and held out a thin glass tablet. On it was a message, written in Tentari calligraphy. Soft lines, glowing words. He couldn't read it, but her voice was quiet and clear. "Your words were not false, your eyes were not cruel. You did not laugh, you did not run, I have chosen not to reject." Derek blinked. "Wait, so is that a yes?" Elena tilted her head. "It is a continuation, if you allow it." Took something from her robe, a smooth polished stone with small carvings. "I will begin with this," she said, and placed it in his hand. Derek turned it over. "What is it?" "A listening stone," she said. "You speak into it. 1 thought per day. When you are ready, I will speak back." "You want me to talk to a rock?" Elena smiled. "Yes. That is how my people learn if 2 minds can stand side by side." Back in his room, Derek placed the stone on his table. He stared at it, then picked it up and said, "Hi, I'm Derek. I don't really know what I'm doing, but your voice is nice, and your tentacles still look cool." Sorry if that was weird again. The stone shimmered once, softly. Listening, day by day he spoke. Not big things, just small thoughts. "I fixed a power conduit today. Thought of you. This soup is terrible, hope you never have to try it. I heard Tentari music today. The way it vibrates, it's like a hug." One night the stone glowed for the first time. He picked it up. Eliana's voice came through soft and slow. "Today, I watched you help a small human child fix her shoe. You did not look down. You knelt. That is a good sign. Also, your voice is very warm." Derek smiled like an idiot for 10 minutes. Soon they began to speak in person again. Not much. A few words. A quiet nod. A shared drink at break time. But each day, her tentacles were slightly more visible. And each day, he noticed her more, not just how she looked, but how she listened, how she saw everything, and how no one else ever had. At the week's end, she surprised him. She gave him a painted feather wrapped in silk. It shimmered in shades of green and gold. He looked confused. She explained, "The feather is from my people's skybirds. They are rare, wild. You do not give it unless your feelings begin to change." He held it like it was made of glass. Do you feel that way? She looked into his eyes. I am unsure, but I want to feel it. With you. That night, Derek sat alone with the feather in one hand and the listening stone in the other. He finally said, I didn't mean to start this, but now I don't want it to end. And in a dark room filled with soft light, Elena smiled at the glowing stone. She didn't say anything, but her tentacles moved gently, brushing over her heart. The curious courtship. Derek Malone had never been part of a courtship before. Definitely not one involving a tentacle-haired alien girl, and definitely not one where gifts included a glowing fish and a water orb. But here he was, sitting in the station mess hall, staring at the strange gift on the table. The fish blinked. It had 4 eyes and glowed gently in pale blue and green. It looked happy. He wasn't sure what to do with it. Across the room, Elena sat at her usual corner, table silent and straight-backed. She wasn't eating, just watching. Derek raised the orb carefully and gave her a small smile. She blinked once, then slowly tapped her fingers together. Twice. He had learned enough by now to recognize that gesture. Pleased. Later that evening, he found Kailari, the station's Tentari interpreter. I need help, he said. Kailari raised an eyebrow. Again? She gave me a fish, he whispered. Is that romantic? Kailari didn't laugh, she only nodded. Yes, very. That species only glows when it feels safe. Giving you one means she wants you to feel seen. Derek blinked. It's kind of beautiful. Kailari smirked. You've entered the stage of gift weaving. Gift weaving, she explained, was an ancient Tentari tradition. Once a proposal was open, both individuals offered small personal items, not expensive, but meaningful. If both partners accepted the gifts and continued the ritual, it meant their intentions were real. So far, Elena had given him a listening stone, a skybird feather, and now a glowfish. Derek had given her nothing. That night he sat in his bunk trying to think. He wasn't sure what meant something to him. What could he possibly offer that wouldn't seem ridiculous? He looked around. A pen? No. A mug? Also no. Then his eyes landed on a worn-out jacket, faded, green with a stitched patch that read, Derek's first salvage job. It was the first real thing he earned in space, the first time he felt useful. He folded it neatly and wrapped it in plain cloth. The next morning, he waited outside the lab. When Elena arrived, he stood up nervously. I want to give you something too. She looked down at the bundle in his hands. He held it out. She took it gently, unwrapping it with care. Her fingers ran across the fabric. Then she pressed the jacket to her chest. Her tentacles shimmered faintly. With golden sparkles, she looked up and her voice was quiet. You gave me something full of memory. That is, rare. Over the next few days, their exchanges continued. Elena gave him a vial of scent crystals, smelling faintly of mint and sunlight. She had crushed them herself. Derek responded with a metal compass, one his grandfather gave him, even though it was useless in space. She gifted a stone ring carved with strange symbols. He gave her a music chip loaded with earth songs. Mostly soft rock, some jazz. And slowly, everything began to change. They still didn't talk much. But they didn't need to. They ate together, sat in silence, walked side by side down quiet halls. People stopped staring. No one laughed anymore. Because now it didn't feel like a joke. It felt real. One evening, Derek found Elena waiting at the garden dome. She didn't speak, just pointed toward the stars. Then she pulled something from her robe. It was a woven strand, made of 3 colors, human brown, Tentari blue, and starlight silver. She handed it to him carefully. This is called a joining thread. If you tie it to something of yours, it means you are ready to stop weaving and begin building. Derek looked at the thread, then at her. His throat tightened. He didn't answer. Not with words. He simply pulled out his compass and tied the thread through its ring, then dropped it into her palm. She didn't say anything, but her tentacles moved. Slow, warm, gentle, wrapping once around his wrist. Not tight. Not forced, just enough to say, "I'm still here. And I choose this." Derek stood there in silence, and for the first time he didn't feel like an outsider. He didn't feel like a fool. He felt chosen. When she touched his hair, the lights in the station garden dome were dim. Stars twinkled through. The glass above and the soft hum of the oxygen filters was the only sound. Derek Malone sat on a bench surrounded by low-growing alien plants that glowed faint purple. The air smelled faintly of mint and smokewood. Across from him stood Elena, her hands folded, her tentacles flowing freely over her shoulders for the first time. She wasn't wearing her robe, just a simple wrap, woven from Tentari silk and strands of silver crystal. She looked calm, but her eyes shimmered with something new, something fragile. "You came," she said softly. Derek gave a quiet smile. Wouldn't miss it. They had both sent messages that morning, each one a simple symbol, a circle with a line through it. Tentari custom, request for closeness, request to be seen. It was not physical like human dating. It was older, stranger, deeper. "Tonight," Elena said, stepping forward, "I ask permission to see the part of you that is only touched by trust." Derek tilted his head. "You mean, like, my heart?" She shook her head. "No, I mean your hair." He blinked. "My hair?" "In Tentari bonding, we do not touch the skin first. We begin with what is delicate, what grows, what changes, what holds scent. We begin with hair." She paused. "You may say no." Derek didn't move. His hands trembled a little. But then, he leaned forward and said softly, "You can touch it." Elena stepped closer. The garden lights dimmed even further. She raised one arm, and her tentacles slowly reached out. They moved like streams of water floating in the air, glowing softly. Then, gently, they touched his head. Not grabbing, not pulling, just resting. One curved around his ear, another passed through his short, dark strands. A third curled at the back of his neck. Derek closed his eyes. It didn't feel slimy. It didn't feel cold. It felt warm, like silk made of thought and memory, like being noticed for the first time. Elena breathed slowly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Your hair is like field grass, but shaped with care. It smells like metal and storm. It feels safe." Derek let out a shaky breath. "I don't think anyone's ever described me like that." Elena moved closer. "Tentari, only do this once. If we feel no connection, we leave. No pain, no shame." He looked up at her. "And if you do feel something?" She tilted her head. "I begin the second touch. The one that means, I hope." She stepped back gently. The tentacles slowly retracted, folding around her shoulders again. But one lingered, resting lightly on his shoulder, not asking, just staying. Derek looked down at his hands, then back up at her. "I never thought this would happen." She blinked. "You did not want it?" "I didn't expect it," he said. "I didn't think someone like you would ever look at someone like me." She studied him carefully, then said in the simplest voice he had ever heard from her, "But I see you." They sat in silence for a while, not touching, just existing, together. Later that night, Derek sat in his quarters, hair still slightly warm, where her tentacles had touched it. He looked at himself in the mirror, same face, same eyes, but somehow different. He picked up the listening stone, spoke softly. You didn't just touch my hair tonight, you touched a part of me I didn't know was waiting. Across the station, in her quarters filled with soft blue light, Elena curled around the old compass he had given her. She listened to his words, and for the first time since she left her homeworld, she wept, not from sadness, but from something new. Belonging. A decision from the Tentari elders. The next day started like any other on Orion Delta Station, but by noon, everything changed. Elena didn't show up at the lab. She didn't leave a message, didn't answer her communicator. Derek Malone waited. An hour, then 2, then 4. And when he finally asked the liaison office, the answer hit him like a punch to the chest. She's been summoned. The Tentari High Elders, leaders of her distant homeworld, had received news of her bond, not from Elena, but from another Tentari ambassador, one who had seen her touch the human's hair. The gesture had been reported, and now, by ancient law, she had to return home and declare her intent. If the elders rejected her claim, or found Derek unworthy, she would be banished from her people. If she refused to leave Derek, she could never return. That night, Derek sat on his bunk, the listening, stone cold in his hand. He whispered, "I didn't know what I was starting," but he wasn't talking to the stone anymore. He was talking to himself. The next morning, the station received a message. It was short, formal, written in gold on black crystal. The human Derek Malone is invited to the trial of echoes. His presence is required. His heart will be measured. If he declines, the bond will be broken and the Tentari will recall their daughter. Derek didn't hesitate. "I'll go." Leora Tim, the liaison officer, looked at him carefully. "They won't test your muscles, Derek. They'll test your thoughts, your motives, your heart." "I know," he said. "I'm scared for you," she admitted. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, me too." He traveled in silence aboard a diplomatic vessel. Tentari space was quiet, dark, filled with long, glowing structures like crystal towers floating in orbit. Their capital was not on land, but inside a hollowed moon of silver and ice. He was escorted in silence to the Chamber of Echoes, a round hall, walls of shimmering glass. Voices didn't echo there. Thoughts did. 7 elders stood in a half circle, dressed in robes of deep blue and gold. In the center stood Elena. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. But her eyes never left his. The lead elder stepped forward, his voice like sand and wind. "You spoke the ancient phrase, you accepted the thread, you allowed the touch. Now you must speak with truth." They asked him no questions. Instead, they placed a crystal band on his wrist. It pulsed once, then slowly pulled memories from his mind. But not the ones he expected. Not battles, not missions, not medals. They saw his childhood, sitting alone in a schoolyard. His first space job, ignored and overlooked. The day he fixed a broken bot and no one noticed. The day he told Elena, "Your tentacles look great today." Not because of culture, not to win her, but because it was honest. Because it was kind. The band blinked green, then gold, then white. The lead elder stepped back. He did not smile, but he bowed his head once, slow, respectful. The human has not lied. His mind holds storms, but his voice was clean. He did not seek love, but he offered care. That is enough. Elena stepped forward, still silent. She reached into her robe and pulled out the compass Derek gave her. She placed it in his hand and whispered, so only he could hear, "I told them everything. I told them you were the first one to see me, not as a scientist, not as a body, but as Elena." He swallowed hard, then wrapped his fingers around hers and said, "I didn't know what I was doing, but now I know who I want to do it with." The chamber dimmed. The verdict was spoken. Bond allowed, trial passed. The daughter may walk 2 paths, but only if the human walks them with her. Later, as they stood on a bridge of glass overlooking stars, Elena's voice was softer than ever. I thought they would forbid it. They almost did, Derek said. You were brave. I just didn't want to lose you. She paused, then placed a hand on his cheek, and for the first time she let her tentacles touch his skin. Not his hair, not his wrist, but his face. The most sacred touch, the final bond, the test of understanding. The stars outside the Tentari moon spun, slowly. Inside a chamber carved from crystal and silence, Derek Malone stood barefoot on a soft floor of woven moss. Elena stood across from him, her tentacles curled close to her body. She looked nervous. Not scared, just open. And Derek knew. This was different. The bond has been accepted, she said softly. But now comes the final tradition. She stepped forward slowly, carefully. It is not a test of strength, or logic, or skill. Her eyes glowed faintly. It is a test of knowing. Derek looked around the chamber. No chairs, no consoles, no screens, only quiet. Only the two of them. He swallowed. What do I have to do? Elena touched the side of his face lightly with one tentacle. You let me see your thoughts. Now, you must see mine. This was the memory flow. A Tentari ritual where one partner opened a deep part of their mind. Not just thoughts, but feelings. The other would step in, experience the most important moments of their life, exactly as they were felt. No words. No filters, only truth. Will it hurt? Derek asked quietly. Only if you run from what you see. She stepped closer. If you want to stop, just say, enough. But if you say it, the bond cannot continue. Derek nodded. I'm ready. Elena closed her eyes. Her tentacles lifted, 6 of them gently wrapping around his head, shoulders, and heart. And the world vanished. Suddenly, Derek was somewhere else. He stood in a rain-soaked garden under twin moons. Flowers drooped, sky darkened. Elena was there, but smaller. A child. Other Tentari stood around her. None of them spoke to her. They turned away. Their tentacles curled inwards, a sign of shame. Derek felt her confusion, her sadness, her tiny voice inside his chest. Why don't they look at me? The scene changed. She was older now, maybe a teenager, a schoolroom filled with light. She answered every question, solved every puzzle. But when she tried to speak to another student, they turned, not in fear, but in disgust. The pain wasn't sharp. It was quiet, deep, lonely. Then another scene. Her first day on Orion Delta Station. She stood in her lab coat, head down. Humans moved around her, friendly but distant. And then, him. Derek. Smiling like an idiot, holding 2 cups of coffee. You looked cold. Want one? A small warmth bloomed in her chest, tiny but real. He didn't look away. He didn't rush. He just talked. Derek's heart ached. Because now he didn't just remember those moments. He felt them, her hope, her fear, her slow belief that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't meant to be alone. The final memory formed like mist, Elena standing at her quarters window, the stars reflecting in her eyes. In her hands, his compass. In her heart, a silent question. Could someone ever really love what I am? Then, everything faded, and Derek was back in the crystal chamber. He gasped, tears on his cheeks, not from pain, from understanding. Elena stood before him, eyes wide. You didn't stop. He shook his head. How could I? She moved closer. Most humans say enough before the childhood ends. I should have said it when I saw that rain-soaked garden, Derek whispered. But I couldn't. Because I think that's when I first knew I loved you. Her voice trembled. You love me? Not just the parts I understand, he said. Even the ones I don't. Especially those Elena stepped forward, slowly, like gravity had shifted. She reached out and touched his chest. Then you have passed the test of knowing. You have seen. You did not turn away. And now, you may truly walk beside me. A soft glow formed around them. The chamber lit with quiet silver light. No music, no cheers. Just a single moment of stillness, and two people from different stars, no longer strangers. More than words, 3 days passed since the test of knowing, but Derek Malone wasn't the same person anymore. He had walked through Eliana's memories, felt her pain, felt her quiet strength, felt her hope. Now every time he saw her across the station halls, his chest tightened, because now he didn't just admire her, he loved her. But love in Tentari culture wasn't spoken, not in words. It had to be shown, with presence, with touch, with intention, and if he truly wanted to complete the bond, he had to speak in her language, not with his mouth but with something more. He thought carefully. What had she given him? A listening stone, a memory of her people, a feather, a fish, and her thoughts. Not one of them came with a price. All of them came with meaning. So what could he give? That meant everything. The answer came on the 4th night while he watched the stars alone. He didn't sleep. He worked, carefully, quietly. By morning, he stood outside her quarters with a small, hand-built object in his hands. He pressed the chime once, then waited. The suck door opened. Elena stood inside, calm but curious. She tilted her head. You are here early. I needed to be, Derek said. I've brought something. He held up the gift. It was a small box made of old metal pieces from the station's scrapyard. Cleaned, shaped, polished. Inside was the compass he'd given her, now resting on a woven thread of both their colors, human brown and Tentari blue, tied together through a glass bead, and around the bead etched carefully were 3 circles, one for past, one for present, one for choice. Elena looked down. Her breath caught. Derek stepped closer. This is not just a gift, he said quietly. This is my answer. She looked up at him slowly. You wish to bind? I do. She didn't smile. Not the way humans, but her eyes shimmered like water under moonlight, and her tentacles slowly lifted, not dancing, not moving, just rising. As if pulled by gravity toward him. She stepped forward and touched her forehead to his. In Tentari law, no words were needed after that. The bond was sealed. The final step was now hers. She lifted one tentacle and brushed his wrist. Then, softly, slowly wrapped it once fully around his hand. One full coil, one heartbeat, one vow, she whispered, barely a breath. You are chosen. Derek felt something shift inside him. Not magic, not energy, just peace. For the first time in his life, he wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just present and loved. That evening, the station held a quiet gathering, not a party, not a celebration, just friends, co-workers, and curious diplomats watching from afar. Elena entered the garden dome in her ceremonial wrap, threaded with gold. Derek stood at her side in a clean jacket, hair brushed, hands steady. They didn't kiss, they didn't speak, they simply stood beside one another, hand in hand. One human, one Tentari, one bond that began with a sentence he never meant. Your tentacles look great today. Later, as the station lights dimmed and the stars blinked into view, Elena and Derek sat alone near the window. She turned her head slowly. There are no more tests now, she said. He smiled. Good. Because I'm terrible at exams. She laughed softly, then said, But you passed something greater. What's that? She leaned in close, and in a voice only he could hear, You saw me, you stayed, you loved me in silence before I ever knew what to call it. He kissed her forehead. Not quickly, not shyly, just honestly. She leaned into it, and wrapped both hands and 2 tentacles around his shoulders, a gesture that said more than any vow, a gesture that meant forever. He didn't know what he was saying when he said it. But in the end, those 6 simple words led him to a love that spoke louder than language. Because to her, he didn't just see her tentacles. He saw her.